Hi, we begin one of the most exciting parts of this course where we study the elements and principles of design. In construction, we have uh, tools. We have all kinds of cranes and wrenches, and a plumber uses mechanical tools. But in art, we have something called design tools. And each one is used by the artist to create either something that is functional or a painting or a piece of sculpture. See, the artist uses and has technical tools, which include brushes and all types of media materials. But that's not what I'm talking about. The artist has to have at his or her exposure to use what we call the elements of art, design tools, which are really the visual elements of art. So we introduce them, and in this textbook of ours, many of them are covered in depth. The first one, of course, is line. And line is one we're going to spend some time on. We're going to look at the types of line and kinds of line. And then we're going to look at shape. Color, which is a tool an artist uses to give vitality and individuality to his or her work. Then we have texture, which deals with the surface of an object. The surface can be rough or smooth. And we have what is called visual texture, which looks rough. But at the same time, we have tactile texture, and that's how it actually feels. Another element is value. We can have red, but we have many, many shades, even millions of shades of red, going from where we add white and red becomes pink, or we add black where red becomes brown. Light is a key factor, particularly to the sculptor and architect, but also to the painter, where the light is coming from, where the shadows fall. And then, of course, even shadow is used as a tool. But the big one we will talk about also in this book, Sire uses quite a bit of space in his book talking about space. Space is critical, and we will talk about that after we go into a discussion of lines. Now, the visual tools are the elements of art, but art also has some rules. So the elements are the tools, but the principles are the rules. And let's keep that in mind. We use art in this case synonymously with design. So we're talking about a language of visual elements, line, shape, color, texture, as I told you, to express messages without subject matter. And when we studied non-objective art and abstract art, we saw a bit of this. So the artists use the elements and principles to create what we call a composition or a form, an end product that we call an artwork. So Helen Frankenthaler here, there's no subject matter in this. I know it looks like someone slowly pouring a liquid into a bottle and it bouncing up, but that's the figurative. That's what we put to it. But really, it's a good balance. You see red on the right side, red on the yellow, on the left. And there, as a result of that, you have a balance. And we're going to talk about types of balance. Then look how line is used here. We have lines by Van Gogh in the sky, swirly lines. And then we have in the upper right, Henry Matisse gives us an abstraction, but it's rhythmic, it moves. And last but not least, down on the bottom, we look at this fire engine that's full of lines, short lines, long lines, thick lines. So the elements and principles of design are critical. Elements, again, are the design tools. We use line, we use color, we use shape. But principles are the design rules. You have to have balance. You have to have unity. You have to have all kinds of an emphasis, a dominance. Something has to dominate, either a line or a color or a subject matter. And these principles of art include balance. We are symmetrical. Whatever is on one side is on the other. If you were to cut us in half and put it back together again, you have two equal sides. Remember when we were kids, we used to take and fold a piece of paper, and then we cut against the fold, and when we opened it up, whatever we cut on one side would be on the other. We call that symmetrical balance. But when we don't have symmetrical balance, if we have a big red painting on the right side of the room and a red pillow on the other, we have what is called asymmetrical balance. Proportion is a principle of art. Repetition and alternation. The eye likes to see colors and lines and shapes repeated. And the unity and harmony, rhythm, that's a principle of art. And then we have contrast. We have light and dark, but we also have rough and smooth. And we'll talk about that. Last but not least, and I indicated it just a moment ago, we have something we call dominance, emphasis. What kind of suit do you have on today? What colored dress or outfit are you wearing today? And that generally is the dominating feature of your dress for that day. So we talk about centers of interest. Even when we're in interior design or in painting or in sculpture, we still have centers of emphasis. So here's another painting by Matisse. Look how the lines and the colors all work together. So how will we proceed as we study each element and principle of art? One, we want to define. So we're going to look at line in a moment. And line has to be defined. A line is a series of moving points. We're going to talk about kinds of line. What kinds of line are out there? Are they thick or thin? What are the characteristics of line? And then how does line function? What does it do? One thing, it outlines a shape, gives body to a shape. Expressive qualities. Perhaps we will study that more in depth, but we need to know how we use lines. For an example, we have vertical lines. That tends to be a sense of order. We have columns and we have repeated lines over and over again. But when we crisscross lines, whenever we have a diagonal line, that is considered a movement in one direction or another. And when they cross, we usually have a conflict there. So what does each one mean? So as we go into line, now as we look at this work, we see that this is not a shape, it is a line. Why? Because it is not enclosed. It looks like an amorphous shape, but it's just a line. And in all the world, students, all we have are two kinds of line, straight and curved. So what is line? Line is the path of a moving point. If you were to take a magnifying glass and look at any line, you would see points after points moving in any one of 360 different directions. What does 360 suggest? It's the number of degrees in a circumference of a circle. So we have a line can go in any one of 360 directions. And again, in all the world, there are only two kinds of line. We have straight and curved lines. We move on and we start looking at the types of line. And there are three types of straight lines. The first, obviously, is horizontal. And of course, that deals with gravity. Then we have vertical. And these are used by architects and builders because it's commanded by the laws of gravity. But then we have what is called the diagonal line, which can go in any one of 356 directions. Why 356? Because we have 4 in the horizontal and vertical, and then we have 356 additional to total 360 degrees. So there are 3 types of straight lines. 1, horizontal. 2, vertical, straight up and down, 90 degrees. Horizontal, 180 degrees. And then we have the diagonal line. Now going back, we have 4 for this class. We have 4 types of curved lines. We have slightly curved. We have more vigorously curved. We have spiral, and we have zigzag. Now let's look at those. That slightly curved line is used by the artist much more than the others because it suggests gracefulness. You have drapes that curve. You have eyebrows that slightly curve. You have shoulders, calves. We have all kinds of slightly curved lines in the human body and in all kinds of forms. But the more vigorously curved line, when you have someone who uses a curler and the lines in the hair curls up, that's a more vigorously, more active line. And we'll talk about that a little later. Then we have the spiral, where we go up and up and up, or down and down. And there's a museum in New York called Guggenheim, where you actually start at the top and come down in a spiral, never missing any of the pictures that are there. And then we have zigzag. I have a friend, that's the way he drives, all over the place, zigzag. But my point is that's used frequently by the artist. So there are 4 types of curved lines: slightly curved, more vigorously curved, spiral, and zigzag. Now in our textbook, we have what is called a contour drawing, where line defines the outer limits. It defines the shape of the human here, and we have the female nude. And remember, I told you before, the nude is seen in art very frequently because the artist considers the nude the most beautiful form in the world. It is alive. It represents the human being, creativity. And of course, the body can be in so many different positions: dancing, jumping, leaning. So therefore, the artist capitalizes on it. So Henry Breska does a good job here. And in Orso Gorky, these may look like shapes, but there are really lines there. And we have Frank Stella with the half circle on upper left. And then we have Franz Klein. And later on, we're going to talk about positive and negative space. But wherever Klein put a black shape, he created a white shape. So we have positive and negative space. And on the right over here, very famous sculptor by the name of Giacometti. Giacometti did these long, tall figures that are fantastic. In California, there's a church built with such magnificent lines. It's called the Cristo Cathedral. And it just looks like a big mirror, big sculptural piece. Giacometti has done many works, but his work in the 40s, Pointing Man, and this is in our textbook, if you will look at it. And Hung Lu, a person who mastered space and line in her works, and her background and this is an oil, but look how you see how orderly the vertical lines in the back tend to unify the painting. Then we can take vertical lines which seem to be waves going back and forth, but this is expressive. You can't say this is dead. It's alive. It's moving. And Titian's work, and let's pronounce these artists correctly, Titian, the Assumption and Consecration of the Virgin. This is a fresco. Now, we will look at others later. This is oil on wood, but Titian also painted in fresco. Fresco is a painting in wet plaster. David, the death of Socrates. Look at all the things that are happening here, but also look at the number of diagonal lines which make for movement. You see a contrast between the horizontal lines in the bricks in the back. Then you see a big arch curving line which takes your eye over into this corner and into this room. But then out here we have what a multiplicity of moving diagonal lines, and that's what gives this whole painting its activity. One of the more famous paintings in all the world is called The Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. Look at that sky. You don't even hardly see the town below in a night scene like this. And of course, if we were to see the sky like this, we'd probably be frightened because of a hurricane or meteorites coming at us. But this is how Vincent van Gogh saw this in 1889. Many of his works, the skies and the landscapes, have this rugged textural quality, which makes him outstanding. Here's another one called the Soa. And then we have the same shape or same line used over and over again. Remember, we said we have repetition, and we have these paintings that only represent, they're non-objective, but they only represent shape and line, and there's a sense of order in them. We saw Romare Bearden's collage before, but let's look at line. Line has characteristics. A line can be many, many different things. A line can be long. A line can be short. A line can be thick, but it doesn't have to be dark. Look at that. A line can be thin. A line can be heavy. And if we were to take that green and make it black, make it heavier. And a line can be thick, but it can be light. Then we have what are called continuous lines. And then we have something we call broken lines. If you look at bricks, you look at the horizontal lines are consistent, but the vertical have a break in it and come down. Then as you look at this, there are certain lines that are more expressive. This is an older Mercedes-Benz, but look, the gracefulness of the slightly curved line throughout this car. And then we have the hubcaps here, which give an excitement to the eye. So you have contrast taking place here. In this case, the texture in the paint does a job and gives us a sense of depth as we look at all the lines that are produced when you paint in this way. Now, our textbook, a wall divided vertically into 4 equal squares and separated and bordered by black bands. Well, look how our eye goes up, then it comes down, then it goes across, and it goes back up. In other words, the eye has a tendency to control, or a line can control the eye and how it moves. Always use this as a case to show confusion. The eye doesn't like too many lines, doesn't like too many colors. And I show this to students to show you this is why we want to study interior design and study simplicity and study how too many lines this room, I would run out because it is a disaster. And yet, when we look at this room, it's too much red, too much pattern, too many pillows, too many print pillows. You have print fabric in the chair, and we only get a little break down here in the carpet, but it's the same repetitious red. So this is a good example of creating a disaster. And when we look at lines at the Dulles Airport in Virginia, that slightly curved line makes that piece of architecture fantastic. We're going to study Egyptian hieroglyphics. I'm going to have you write your name in hieroglyphics, and the Egyptians wrote in a cartouche from the top to the bottom. So my wife's name is Ruth, so it would be R, and then we would do a U, which looks like this 9 backwards, and then we have two choices on T's, and we would do the H, but that would be our cartouche. And I'm going to give you, that's going to be a quiz that everyone will get an A. Look at these lines. This is Henry Moore and how he uses the curved line and his abstraction here of a human being, the knee, the shoulders, the elbows. What a fantastic work that he creates with lines. And then we call this Wing Victory, one of the most magnificent pieces of sculpture preserved from the 5th century and BC. Look at how the Greeks were able to use the fabric and the cloth with slightly curved lines. It looks like the wind is blowing, and it creates a movement as we look at this work of art. So we see lines all around us. There are lines. Look at the Eiffel Tower. And they were going to cover the Eiffel Tower up before the World's Fair. And then they looked at it again and said, these lines are beautiful. These lines constitute a whole. These diagonal lines create activity. And if you were to go to certain parts of East Africa, this is a young fellow coming to suit or to court a young lady. I don't know how you would feel. A young man knocked on your door like this, but he's really dressed up in accordance with his cultural tribal identity. But look at how the lines, in other words, paint and lines have been used as a part of one's decor for many years. So we have vertical lines and horizontal lines. Vertical lines usually reflect dignity and order, power, in other words, height. You know, go into New York City, you see lines, and strength. And diagonal lines depict movement, a shift in the direction, leaning directions. And then, of course, it's action in one way or another. Crisscrossing lines, as I told you before, depict conflict. They depict opposition between lines. They depict opposing forces. So look at the contrast between these slightly curved lines in this Van Gogh on the right and these lines that are on the left, short diagonal lines. Look at the change we get when we have the vertical lines as we go up on these crowns. But when we get to the triangular part, we see more movement at the top than we do the bottom. So slightly curved lines depict a sense of gracefulness and subtlety and soft movement, but and also kind of a gradual shift. But more vigorously curved lines depict volatility and activity and quick movement and sharp shifts and changes, which creates activity to the eye. The painting on the left is by Victor Vasarely, and he's what we call an optical artist, plays with the eye. If you were to stare at that long enough, you would see that those squares began to move. Jack Hanula's work, Art of the City, look how the vertical line dominates and creates a sense of order and peace. So when we talk about the expressive qualities of lines, zigzag, alternating rhythmic shifts, 1, 2, 1, 2, spiral lines, continuous repetition of a circular motion. And so we have diagonal lines in this work, and we have a sense of peace because the horizontal line is used so much. But in this Poseidon, this bronze that's in our textbook, we see how the lines on this piece of sculpture, this Herculean look, is created. We look at the sky of the starry night again. That's fantastic. Mapplethorpe, who passed away several years ago, but look, if you were to take a watch, and we teach this in art school when we're teaching drawing, well, what we do is we take a watch and we say, well, what time is this? That's how artists get the direction of a figure when they get ready to draw. So this looks like about 2:30. This looks like about 10 o'clock. This looks like about 1 o'clock. And we begin to put together the direction of the figure by using a clock. So lines are used in a multiplicity of ways. Short lines, long lines, thick lines, thin lines. And we use line in all kinds of ways so that it directs your eye. Look at the starry night on the right and look at on the left where Van Gogh does it's called the Soa, and this particular painting is in our textbooks. So I've introduced you to the first element, and I'm going to give you a handout which reflects all these notes, but I want you to go back over this PowerPoint again and get it down pat. You have covered the first element, which is line.